Tonight's program, our first speaker will be Ron Wallace, who many of you know. And I want to show you a few pictures before he comes on about the monument that he restored. And that's how this program was kind of put together, that he had restored the monument, we wanted to talk about it, and we thought we'd also add some information about Edward Pranker himself, about the mills that are still there at the intersection of Central Street and Elm Street, and about Pranker's Pond, which bears his name, although there was a pond there over 100 years before he ever saw Saugus, and there's a pond there now. And we can say there's water, but it wasn't always the same body of water, and it wasn't always known by the same name. Before Ron comes on, I just wanted to show you a little bit about the monument, which is in Riverside Cemetery, and a little bit about Edward Pranker. He was born in 1792 in Wiltshire, England, and moved to the United States in 1820. He was in Danvers for a little while, and then he moved to North Andover, where he worked in the woolen business, and that became his career, although not always in the same place. In the early 1830s, he moved to another woolen business in Salem, New Hampshire, with a partner, and then by 1838, he was ready to go forward again with an abandoned mill on the Saugus River, closer to where he had first arrived in North America, in Saugus. So there was a mill there, but he enlarged it. So pretty much everything that's there now are things that he built, and then a few additions since then.
Was that Salter?
It became Salter's Mill, but it was known as Pranker's Mill, and then there was someone named True who owned it a while after that. Many of the owners didn't last very long before they either found this wasn't their business or moved on to other locations. Flannel cloth and bed sheets were the first products that Pranker made, and it was very successful. So he built an additional mill across the street, and then he built a village of houses for his workers, and enlarged the dam that was already existing. Built a new dam because the one that was in use during the ironworks time had fallen into disrepair. And in 1857, he, his son George Pranker, and John Armitage, and I'm not sure how they met up, who also had experience in fabric making, formed Edward Pranker and Company. So became quite well known, very successful. I'll turn it over to Ron. And he's got a nice display of the monuments over there.
How you doing? So my name's Ron Wallace, and I'm a lifelong resident of Saugus. I've lived here 55 years. So I grew up in that area. A lot of my childhood was spent down at Pranker's Pond, fishing, riding my bike. We used to skate. Remember when the ice would freeze? Doesn't even get cold enough anymore. I actually got a severe concussion on Pranker's Pond playing hockey when I was a kid. Then moving on to high school, I worked at the machine shop right across from Pranker Mills, which is called CCG. So I saw those mills every single day. And then in my 20s, I actually lived on Pranker Road for about 6 years. And one interesting thing is I've actually never been in either one of those buildings ever in my life. Bill worked there, so I'm interested to hear about that. So anyways, I like to, restore headstones, and after I did Ben Jonson, I spoke about that one last year, I saw the Pranker. It's a whole, if you've never been there, it's huge. It's the whole family's there. There's even pets buried in there. And the monument is just, it's massive. It's like 14 feet tall. So I have this poster board, and I take before and after pictures, and you can see all the, it's called like algae or lichens or mold or whatever you want to call it. but they were all like this, and you can see like I sprayed the D2 on, and like a month later, that's what it looked like. It looks like a brand new stone. The pictures don't even do it justice, but it took me, you know, a couple hours here and there, a few months to do. I wasn't gonna just do the big one. I wanted to do all of them. So I think there was about 14 smaller stones all around. And the biggest challenge by far, I actually got a 10-foot ladder and I couldn't even reach the top. I got a backpack sprayer and I got it all in my eyes, and the stuff's non-toxic, but I was like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? But I actually kind of forgot about it, and the way this stuff works is when it rains, it just keeps like cleaning the stone. And about a month went by after I really went to town on it, and I went back one night and I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was like how much it had cleaned. Like, it was amazing. But yeah, the whole family's in there, so I'm kind of known in town. I have an antique car. These are pictures I took several years ago, but there's my car at the mill at Prancus Pond. And you can see, like in this one here, this is when I sprayed the cleaner on, and it's like that's what the stone does when it's reacting to the cleaner. And then you scrub it, and then you wash it off with like, you know, just regular water, like bottles of water. I bring gallons of them, and you need a lot of water, and then you just let it sit, and every time it rains, it just keeps cleaning the stone over and over and over. It's really amazing stuff. But yeah, I felt, you know, this was a good one to do, seeing I grew up there, and that's pretty much it, you know. Laura talked about the history of them. I looked online, and there's not a lot about them online about the history. I mean, she pretty much said everything that I could find. But I mean, that's most of it. Any questions? Or?
Did you have to get permission from the Franklin?
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm glad you said that. Yeah, that's actually I forgot. So this is a really cool story. I don't ever clean a headstone unless I get permission from someone, either the family. You know, I've cleaned stones on private property from the town, the city, the cemetery commission, whatever, the owners. So this one, he's been dead for almost 160 years. And I remembered there's a Facebook group called Friends of Prancus Pond. I don't know if anyone in here is on it. And that group was started when they were building that big apartment complex. And I remembered a few years ago, a guy named Ed Pranker, he lives in Kansas, I believe. He flew up here with his grandkids because he did like Ancestry.com, one of those DNA tests. And he found out that he's related to the actual Ed Pranker, and that's his name, Ed Pranker. So I found him on Facebook, and I messaged him. And I think at first he didn't know, you know, I asked him if I could clean it, and he just kind of didn't know what to say. So the lady who's the admin of that Facebook group met him, I believe, when he came here, and she messaged him and said, yeah, he's you know, does these all the time, and you don't have anything to worry about. So he said, go for it. And I just think it's cool he came here, because, you know, he was like, there's a building, a pond, and a street in Saugus named after someone he's related to, and he has the same name. I thought it was really cool that he flew here. So I've sent him pictures before and afters of my work, and he was pretty happy about it. Glad you mentioned that. But I always, I don't ever clean a stone without permission, and I use this cleaner. It's called D2 Biological Solution. That's the only stuff I use. I use that and water, and that's it. And you got to use brushes that are like soft bristle. I use wood, like paint sticks. Nothing like that'll damage the stones. I heard usually when people clean stones and they damage them, they had good intentions. I think it was last year I heard on the news that a lady cleaned over 200 stones at a cemetery without permission, and she used like a steel brush and bleach, and she ruined every stone. And they were going to criminally charge her, and she was just trying to do a nice thing. But I did a lot of research on this. I'm on the Cemetery Commission in Saugus, and I did a lot of research on this. There's some groups on Facebook and YouTube videos and stuff, so I made sure I understood what to do before I started doing these. And I think I've probably done about close to 40 stones since 2021. This one, Ben Johnson, those were the two. Those were over the top. But usually the other ones I do are much smaller. They're not too bad. But I mean, as far as you know, cleaning them, it's like dirty, hard labor and stuff. I don't mind that. But the hardest part by far, and I didn't know this when I started, is getting permission. It's really hard. Like some of these stones, like I don't know who, you know, I don't know any family members or anything. So if I can't get any connection there, I just don't clean it. But that's pretty much it. If anyone.
What's the next project you have?
I don't actually have one right now, but now that so cleaning the stones is seasonal. You can't do it when it's cold, and when you spray the D2 on, it has to be dry for 12 hours. Can't rain either, so you know you have to. It depends on the weather, but you can't do it in the winter. So usually, like in the fall, I walk the cemetery a lot because I'm on the commission and I want to like get familiar with the layout there. It's pretty big in there. And I just stumble upon, you know, different stones. You guys probably heard of the school teacher. It was back in the late 30s, I believe. She was falsely accused of giving students alcohol. Yeah. And she ended up losing. I cleaned her stone. And that was a cool one too, because her nephew, who's in his 80s now, lives in New Hampshire. And another town meeting member that I'm friendly with had his phone number. And I called him and he answered the phone and I told him what I was doing and he said, go for it. And I wanted him to come down and see it, but he was older and he wasn't up to driving down here. But that was another good one, because that's a pretty well-known story in Saugus. So that's pretty much it.
After you clean a stone, how long before it starts to collect algae or whatever?
Usually I think it's a couple of years you're good. So there's two different methods for using D2. One of them, so you always wet the stone first, and you can spray it on and you can just walk away, and it takes a lot longer, but it kills all the algae and everything on there, and every time it rains it keeps cleaning it. So if you go back in like 3 months or 6 months, it'll be clean. But the method I do is the down and dirty method, and I bring brushes and everything and I do it all right there. Usually there's like, if it's like really dirty, there's like stuff that's welded on there and I don't want to damage the stone, so those I'll just spray again when I'm done. But if you scrub it right then and there and you pour a few gallons of water on it, it'll look like, you know, $1 million when you're done. And it just keeps getting cleaner and cleaner. But this pranker one was just, it was over the top. It was the height that was the problem on it. I brought a 6-foot ladder, an 8-foot ladder, and then I had to have my neighbor bring a 10-foot ladder. And it wasn't even tall enough. So,
Limestone or stone?
I believe it was marble.
A marble.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of the slate stones, the old slate stones, they seem to hold up really well.
Yeah.
So did they?
Yeah, I'm not positive on exactly what kind of material it was, but there was all, like, the whole family is all around it too. And there was one that said, like, you can see them in the pictures. I'll send them around after. This one, I believe this one here, it says our pet. And then this is mother. It was like all the way around. So I think I used 3 gallons of D2 doing this one, and Ben Johnson I used like 2. But this is the stuff you use.
Is the teacher in the Riverside Cemetery?
Say that again?
The teacher. What cemetery is she?
She's in Riverside, and she's kind of right by the rock wall.
Okay.
So Ben Johnson's on the rock wall too, but he's over by the little house. Right to the left of it. She's more towards the Saugus Center side. And I found all of these just like walking around the cemetery. I was in there one November, just walking around, you know, checking things out, and I saw the Ben Johnson one, and I like instantly, I knew the name. I was like, wow, I didn't know he's buried here. And at first I wasn't gonna do it because it was so big and dirty that I thought it was too much, and then I decided to do it. I waited about 6 months, and once I started doing it, I was like, I'm getting over my head. But after a few days of doing it, I started to really see progress on it. So that was kind of a lesson for me, and I just did the pranker one like a little bit at a time because I work full time, so just in baby steps, you know. If the weather was good, I would have all the stuff in my car, and I would just kind of pull in there on my way home from work, and I'd spend an hour here, an hour there, and you know, a month later or whatever, it was looking really good. I think, Laura, you went there and took some pictures recently,
I did,
right?
yeah.
Looked pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah, for sure.
Because, yeah, you can look at these pictures when I'm done. You can't even, these don't even do justice for how dirty this stone was. I mean, it's probably never been cleaned in 157 years.
Right.
Same with Ben Johnson. I bet you 90 years that stone never got cleaned ever. And it's right on the road, so it probably had all pollution from the cars and everything. But yep, these are all at Riverside.
If I did this right, we could see the next stone. I mean,
Approximately where is the Pranker Monument?
So if you come like, you know where Denver Street is? It's like a one-way. So if you go straight across Denver, right in, there's like the, I think there's like a dog memorial or something right there. You take a right there and you can't miss it. It's really tall.
And my second question is, being on the cemetery commission, when do we run out of land?
Real soon.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother, I can't even get into that.
Okay.
I think we only have about maybe 28 plots left, 30.
7 when I went there. Well, I'm sorry, I was asking about the veterans.
Yeah. So you have to be a Saugus resident to be buried there, and they're down to like 30 plots. But I want to make that point. I didn't say that. This has nothing to do with me being on the commission. This is just, I do this on my own. It's like a hobby, I guess. And I'm retiring in like 3 years, so I might like start doing more of it when I'm retired, just to stay busy. Right now, I just kind of do them here and there.
Are you gonna stay with Saugus doing it, or are you gonna?
I'll probably branch out a little bit. I'm not going to go real far, but I'll do the surrounding towns once I'm retired. I enjoy it. It's just the cleaner is really
do it
expensive,
fancy.
and you can only buy it online. They don't sell it in stores. So I get it from a place down in Connecticut, and they mail it to me.
So places like Arlington National Cemetery and some of the major, well, Mount Auburn Cemetery here, do they have people that regularly clean?
I think most of it's volunteer, but Arlington, all VA, they all use D2. So I also found out in my research that if it's a veteran, I believe the VA owns the headstone. I believe that's what I read. And they said that you can actually clean a veteran's headstone without permission, but it says in the rules that you have to use specific cleaner, and it mentions D2. They actually say the brand name. I was impressed with that. So these were taken recently?
Wow.
Yes.
That's impressive.
Like, I can't seem to do this.
So
Right?
did you ever ask for anybody to reimburse you for your supplies?
I haven't yet. When I retire, I might charge a small fee. I enjoy doing it, but it is expensive.
Yeah.
You know, so in the future I may, but not right now. It's
also-
like with shipping, it's like $55 a gallon, and it goes fast, especially on these big stones.
Have you tried, similar like Earth Day, do you ever think of bringing a bunch of volunteers together to do a particular section each year?
I've had people ask me to, I mean, I'm just an amateur, I'm self-taught, but I've had people say they want to come down and watch me do it. But on Veterans Day one year, I did Captain Nolan. His father's buried there, Tom Nolan's father, and he was the fire chief in Saugus, and he was also a World War II vet. So I brought my son down there and he cleaned his headstone for community service hours, which I thought was neat because it was on Veterans Day.
Yeah.
I think it's very
I want to hear more, but we'll probably need to go to the next speaker and then
Yeah, I'm all
adjourn
set unless anyone has
afterwards.
questions.
Okay, all right.
But, so I'll hand this out and you guys can just take a look at it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. This is Edward Pranker in the background now, and he and his son and his partner built the mills, operated them until Ed Pranker died in 1865, and then it went through a succession of other hands. Most of the mill owners did wool, some kind of wool products for many, many years. And eventually, you'll have to tell me what year, or you can say it when you begin. It became Salter's Mills, and many people knew it by that name.
Question before we start. What I'm reading that book, the Saugus history, the little book that they have put out. And is that not the same thing as the Sweetser?
No.
Where is the
the
Sweetser
Sweetser, I'm not sure that that mill still exists at, in any recognizable
Does it seem
form.
like
That
the
was in
location was
Clifton,
that mill?
near Cliftondale.
Near Clifton.
Yeah, and yeah. Does anybody have an idea what became of Sweetzer's mill? No, there were quite a few other mills in the 19th century in Saugus. Makepeace made snuff, which was very popular for a while. There was chocolate.
Actually, Sweetser did too. Sweetser made stuff as well.
Yes, yes. That's Cliftondale was known for it. It was like the snuff capital of New England. And chocolate for a while. Those were a few of the products that were made.
Saugus was pretty much divided into areas too. We had East Saugus, you had Cliftondale,
Yeah,
you had North Saugus, you had Lyndhurst.
Right.
They were all separate.
Okay. I'll let you take over, but I think I've found a seat.
Okay. I got to the Salter's Mills kind of in a funny way. I really didn't have any interest in going there, but I ended up there for a short period. I was born in Saugus, right behind where the senior center is today on Beach Street. A midwifery in those days. So I started out though, my father, we went to Lynn. I went to the Tracy School in Lynn for the first grade. And then we moved back to Saugus. Eventually, I graduated from Saugus High School. And because I started in Lynn, and Lynn in those days started at 6, and Saugus started at 7 for anyone that was in my group of September. So I was the youngest one in class. And that really got my goat. When we put out the Tonaquanian, which is the yearly book, I wouldn't get a picture. I'm one of only 3 in the 52 Tonaquanian that don't have a picture in there, because I was elected class baby, being the youngest one in the class. And I didn't like that at all. Now it doesn't bother me. I'm 89 years old. I'm well past class. Okay. After graduation, I applied for the GE Apprentice course and the Boston Naval Yard. I ended up choosing GE because they gave us a 40-hour work week, but they also sent us to MIT 2 nights a week for 3 years. So that we got a very good education and a chance to to work through that. Now, but because I had been born in Lynn and went to school the first grade, and being younger than everybody in the class, when it came time to choose, I chose GE rather than Boston. And then they told me, well, yeah, you're in, but we can't let you in until you're 18 years old. And here I was only 17 in June when we graduate. So now I have to find something to do for the rest of the summer. So I went down to Salters Mills. I talked to them. They said, oh yeah, we got plenty of room for another person. In those days, we were processing the cotton. Now, we took the cotton, we put it down an area about maybe 40 feet long and maybe 20 to 25 feet wide. And there were 3 of us, and we'd put it in piles and spread it out, try to get it all even. And then we took the cans, water cans, with the spout, and we'd walk like this, covering it. That's how we processed the wool, the cotton rather, like that, all the way. Not a bad job. Like I say, it gave me something to do because I couldn't go to GE until I was 18 years old. As soon as I got 18, though, I was out of there. Well, I wanted to go to MIT, too. A couple of things about mills. I looked up Samuel Slater. They call him the father of American factory. He was born in Derbyshire, England, and then moved to the U.S. because he didn't like the way things were going in England, in what he tried to do. He built mills, and he built rotating systems to pull the water in. And I think that's what they did originally in Saugus, in the mills there. But he come over to the U.S., and he went into Rhode Island. Now, I don't know how we ever got the name Slater's Mills. Probably something from him, someplace along the line. But he developed the mills that they used for cotton processing all through New England. He had them in Newburyport, he had them up in Manchester, New Hampshire, he had them in Merrimack, he had them down in Waltham, he had them down on the Cape. He built them all over the place. Let's see. Oh, in those days, this was a 18. What did they have? Very early 1800s. They used children in the mills. 4-year-olds and 10-year-olds could work in the mills because everything was simplified. Whole families would work in mills. If you look at the buildings by the historic site, by the National Historic Site, there's 2 buildings that you see on each side of the road. Those were probably built originally for people that worked in the mill there, because all the mills throughout Massachusetts and New Hampshire, they had their people, their workers, in apartments right by the mill so that they could get there, because transportation was very difficult in the early 1800s. So the early way was to build apartment houses and cover your workers. Well, like I say, they used children, and they worked all through the processing of the materials. They had machines that ground it up later on, but in the early days they had to saw it all apart, make an awful mess, and finally they got to the point where they could produce good material, and from there on everything went smoothly, including Salters Mills that processed.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah.
Where did the cotton come for the mill that you worked at?
What's it?
Where did the cotton come from in the mill that you worked at? Did it come from the south, or
Where was the cotton that was being
The cloth that you were working with.
worked with? Where was that cotton coming from? Was it coming from the south or was it coming?
I've got no idea.
Oh, okay.
You know, I wasn't really involved in that company.
There was a rail trail through, I mean, there was a rail that went through that,
Yeah,
so it could very well came up from the south
but
via rail.
I just ended up there because I needed something to do until I could go to work in GE and go to school at MIT. That made it, you know, really something that you look forward to. GE has since done away with the apprentice course, but in the apprentice course, we worked. I chose to go to the maintenance area. Most of the kids that joined in that went into machinery, and they produced bullets and things like that. I ended up as a journeyman carpenter. Yeah.
So after you went to MIT, you went back and worked at GE?
Oh, no, we worked in GE 40 hours a week and went 2 nights a week to MIT.
And then you finished at MIT, and then you moved on to something else?
Yeah, after I graduated from the apprentice course, in the apprentice course, we were excluded from draft. In those years, 52, they were drafting. And so we got a clearance through that. Now in 57, the draft board in the Saugus was almost depleted. And I was number 1. Here I'm 22 years old and they're drafting 18-year-olds. So, but then I enlisted instead and went into ASA, Army Security Agency. But then when I finished my 3 years, I had done 3 years of National Guard while I was in high school. And then when I finished my time in the Army, I was in Chitose, Japan, way up north in Hokkaido. When I finished that, I come back to GE. I worked in GE for quite a few years, and I was very pleased the way things were going, because by serving in the Army for the 3 years and the National Guard for the 3, I got free scholarships. They paid all the money for my tuition. And the VA gave me money to take care of all my expenses. So I made money going to college. So I went all the way, when I finished the time there, I went over to BU. And I did time at BU. I was working nights naturally because I was working in GE during the day. But yeah, I got an engineering degree, and then I got a master's degree, thanks to General Electric Company and the veterans. And then I left GE, because by then I had the capability of doing computer work.
Mr. Stewart?
Yeah.
When you worked at the mill,
Yeah.
were they still using water power?
Did they what?
Water power at the mill?
No.
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 We're done with that?
We just put, all I know is we put creamy stuff on top of the clothing that we
But
ripped
how were
up.
they powered?
What's that?
How was the plant powered?
The power?
Yeah.
Well, we had electricity in those days because when we finished up, we had to shovel it all into an elevator that carried it down. And they bundled it up down on the first floor.
Do you know when that factory ceased using water power?
No, I don't.
Yeah. I don't
That would have
know.
been way back in the
that would've been way back
1800s.
before, but
Long time before me.
Your steam power.
you're probably still not making a nickel an hour there, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why they built it that close to the pond, because water power.
Can we reserve other questions for after the program so that the SCTV people can leave. And we have one more presentation, and then we can go and snack and ask more questions. So our final presenter is Paul Kenworthy, who is a park ranger at Saugus Ironworks, and he'll be talking about Pranker's Pond, sometimes known as Lily Pond.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is, you know, we talked a little bit about the mills and stuff, and it actually kind of segues nicely from this question. The New England was a leading area during the Industrial Revolution, mainly because of the geology here. There are a lot of, well, the area was formed by glaciers coming through here, and they scoured out little valleys everywhere. And so there's little ponds and rivers which were good for running water mills. And so it was a natural place to set up water mills. In the 1800s, later in the 1800s, people started using steam power. And a lot of the mills that are still left, like the big brick mill buildings, if you go up and look at Pranker's, there's a giant smokestack there, which is a cell phone tower now, but it was, used the steam engines. They powered it with steam engines, and then they switched over to electricity. So this is late in the 1800s. They're going from water power. What I want to do is talk a little bit about the Saugus River and the effect that it had on this development. So originally, when the Puritans first settled Saugus in 1629, the area up around here was basically wilderness. There were a couple people who lived in this area, but there weren't very many people living up here. And there was a gentleman named Dexter who owned 600 acres. And he sold the 600-acre farm he had to the ironworks. So they started the ironworks in 1645. The original ironworks was down in Braintree. It wasn't in Saugus. But Braintree turned out to be a bad place for it because didn't have all the raw materials they needed. They didn't have enough water to run their water wheels. They didn't have enough ore to work. So they went up and down the coast looking for a better place, and they discovered the Saugus River was the perfect location for an ironworks. It was an enormous industrial operation. It was 600 acres. 640 acres is a square mile. So the Saugus Ironworks was almost a square mile in 1645, 1646. They had 11 water wheels there. They needed an enormous amount of water. And the ironworks is located right where the Saugus River changes from salt water to fresh water, both south of the ironworks. A lot of people don't know, by the way, that the Geologic Survey has a monitoring station on the Saugus River right outside the national park. So they discovered this tidal estuary. So there's about 3 miles of the Saugus River, goes up and down with the rise and fall of the tides in Inland Harbor. And then right where the ironworks is, there's a rapids, and there's a 32, 34-foot drop in the Saugus River. And that's what you need for water wheels. You need falling water. You stick a water wheel in a pond, it's just going to sit there. You have to have moving water. And so they're at the fall line. It's fresh water up above that. And it goes up to Wakefield. The headwaters of the Saugus River is Lake Quinnipiac in Wakefield. And a lot of people are kind of confused because the water flows out of Lake Quinnipiac going in the opposite direction from Saugus. It actually goes under 128, it goes north under 128, then it goes east, and then it goes back under 128. So it does this little weird loop around. And then it runs down the edge of what's Breakheart Reservation now, Camp Neon, comes down to Route 1 right by the Dunkin' Donuts at Linfells Parkway, crosses under Route 1, runs along the side of Route 1 there, and it finally goes over to Central Street. It cuts over to the east and goes over and crosses under Central Street just above Elm Street, and then goes down to where the ironworks was. And they needed an enormous amount of water. They had 11 water wheels, Some of these water wheels ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The furnace, for example, runs non-stop. Once you start the furnace, you just run it until the furnace literally burns up. So they needed an enormous amount of water. So they built a giant dam on the Saugus River. It was over 100 feet long. It was 17 feet high. And they flooded all of what's North Saugus today. The reservoir for the Saugus Iron Works was 240 acres underwater. It went all the way up to the Wakefield line. Wakefield's kind of an interesting story too, because Wakefield changed names 5 times. Many people may already know this, but the town was originally called Saugus. Then they changed the name to Lynn. Then they broke off a piece of Lynn and called it Reading. Then they broke Reading into 3 pieces. They had North Reading, Reading, and South Reading, and then they renamed South Reading Wakefield, which is why if you go and look at the monuments in the Common in Wakefield, they don't say Wakefield. They say South Reading, because in the 1860s when they were building this stuff, it was names. So this was an enormous, all of what's Linfels Parkway, that whole area was all underwater, all the way up to where the Voke is basically now, was a giant reservoir. And they had a holding pond just above the ironworks, and they had canals that went down to the various buildings, because some of the buildings have multiple water wheels on them. The Forge building has 4 water wheels on it, the rolling and slitting mill has 2. There were blacksmith shops that had 3 water wheels. So they had to divert the water into these different channels going down. The ironworks is a financial failure. So it goes out of business in the 1670s, and they knock the dams down. And there's a sort of story about that. One of the things that these tidal estuaries do is there are fish which live in the ocean, and in the springtime they come up these tidal estuaries, they go to the freshwater ponds, the head, and they spawn. And alewives and herrings and things like that do that. And there were lots of fish running up the river. They built the dams for the ironworks, and the fish stopped going up the river. People in Wakefield, the farmers in Wakefield, were used to trapping the fish, and they're complaining about the fact that the fish have stopped running. So when the ironworks went out of business, they actually sued the owner of the property. It had reverted to being a 600-acre farm. They sued the owner of the property. They said, "You're not an ironworks anymore. You don't need a dam. You don't need a reservoir. Tear the dam down. Let us have our fish back." And the owner said no. And so they took him to court, and they lost. So they took him to court again, and they lost. And they took him to court again, and they lost. And then mysteriously one night a hole appeared in the dam and it washed away. So my best guess is it's farmers from Wakefield, South Reading. So for a long time there was no major industry. And then in the late 1700s, this is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. People are discovering that New England is a great place to build mills. And there's the Saugus River sitting there. So they start putting dams and mills along the Saugus River. And they put a succession of them all upstream from where the ironworks is now. And you can actually go into the woods. There, 222 Central Street, which is the U-Haul dealership and the self-storage place. If you go onto the other side of the river, you can walk down Bridge Street, and there's a footpath from Central Street. You can go down into the woods there, and you can still see the foundation for the dams and the fish ladders, because they learned about the fish, and people complaining about the fish not coming up. So they built fish ladders with the dams starting in around 1800 when they built those dams.
Are you saying on the pond side of Route 1 or the opposite? I mean,
On
you go
the-
down to the pond and go all the way down to that marketplace you're talking about. On that
Well, I'm talking about right by by Central Street,
Okay.
just below where Elm Street branches off of Central Street.
Yeah.
So
Well,
the Saugus.
there's an entrance to there right across from the mill. Right across from Prinker's Mill, there's an entrance that goes back into that area, and there's a walking path through there, biking trail that goes through there, and that will take you, that trail will take you all the way to Route 1, but it comes out behind Home Depot, or between Home Depot and that.
Where the Barnes and Noble used to be.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're going north up the Saugus River, there's the edge of the national park, and there's 222 Central Street, that brick mill building sitting right on the water there. And the river runs right along the side of it.
Right.
There's foundations for dams and fish ladders still in the woods there. You can go. Then you continue up the Saugus River, you come to Elm Street. It goes under Elm Street, you continue up, and it goes across under Central Street. And you can still see channels from the mill dams. There was actually a series of ponds and dams for all these different businesses. One of the things that's kind of amazing is a lot of people built a lot of mills in Saugus in the early 1800s. And some of these mills would last 2 years or 3 years. It turned out to not be economic, and so they built sawmills, and they built chocolate mills and leather processing, and textile mills become real big in the early 1800s, in the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s. Textile mills become the thing, and most of them are cotton mills at that point in time. The Civil War changes all that because the North is cut off from the supply of cotton during the Civil War, and they tend to transition to wool and shoes and other types of mill operations. But Pranker's Pond was just one of the ponds that was along this chain of dams that went up towards Wakefield. It was one of the biggest ones, but when it went out of business using water power, when it switched to steam power and then to electricity, people stopped maintaining the dams, and eventually the dams fell into ruin and washed away and stuff. And I think the last dam on the Saugus River was torn down in 1956 when I was 1 year old. And prior to that, the Prankers Dam created a rather large reservoir, and they called this Lily Pond. And this is what Laura was talking about earlier, was there were all kinds of recreational activities on Lily Pond. People skated on it in the wintertime, and and there was canoeing and swimming and all sorts of stuff like that. One of the things that I find kind of interesting is that one of the things that this area became noted for was ice. And Frederick Tudor, who started the ice business, the first ice he cut was in Saugus, but it wasn't on the Saugus River. It was on Stevens Pond. Yeah, so if you go over where the Stop and Shop and the Square One Mall is behind there, there's a pond, and that's where Tudor took his first ice from. But he expanded all over the place. So I don't think this is really legible for people to see this. I was hoping to show you the area where the original ironworks reservoir was, because it was massive.
There was an old map. I couldn't manage to pull it up on the screen. Maybe in the televised version they'll be able to figure it out. But yeah, it extended down. If you walk to the Prankers Pond recreation area today, which is a little hard to find the entrance to it if you don't already know. It's off of Cliff Road, which is at the very far end of Appleton Street. There's parking for a couple of cars, but it looks like just a dirt road going in there. And the recreation area was established in 1976. A lot of wildlife there. The other way you can get to it is from, it used to be Barnes & Noble, Harbor Freight now, I think it is. If you go down a place that looks like you're just walking in the woods behind the building, no sign or anything, you will find a well-trodden path, and that will eventually lead you to the pond. That little stretch of land is the valley where that used to be flooded. So you can sort of sense, if you walk there, why that would have been wet at one time. Now there's a large construction project on the hillside adjacent that you can definitely see and hear all the activity when you're down in the recreation area. There's still quite a bit of wildlife.
Yeah, and one of the things that's going on in Saugus with all those different places where there were mills and stuff is that invasive species have gotten into the water system. And so there's Phragmites and loosestrife choking a lot of these.
That seems to us be happening at Frankers too.
Yeah, exactly. So in the case of the ironworks, the National Park Service actually shut down the park in 2008, dammed the river and dredged it out because it had completely overgrown with Phragmites and loosestrife. You literally could walk across the Saugus River. So that area has all been cleaned out. So basically from Hamilton Street up to Elm Street was cleaned out, but all these other places like the Prankers Pond and stuff.
I was at the ironworks, and over where the maintenance shed is, there's a path that goes along the river all down through there. It's a path about this wide.
Yeah.
And that goes all the way down to almost to Hamilton Street, correct?
Yeah, but not quite to Hamilton Street. It dead ends. There's a big water pipe across the Saugus River, and that's the end of the national park property, and that's where the path ends.
Yeah. Just a note, in the 1960s, 1961, there was a group of men in Wakefield that had a contest, and we have it in our book, Lake Quannapowitt, but they started in Lake Quannapowitt and they canoed all the way down to the ironworks. And so it was possible. They had to cross over Route 1.
Yeah.
But you could actually do that at that time in the 60s. But that was one of the last times that you could actually go all the way down on a canoe from Wakefield all the way to the ironworks, to the ocean.
Yeah,
it's clogged.
Yeah, there's actually a funny thing. If you go to the ironworks and you go and stand on the dock in the river, there's a sign, a wayside we call them, that talks about the river, and it says the Saugus River is no longer navigable with access to ocean waters. The reason it says that, it's not true. But the reason it says it is that sign was put there before the 2008 dredging. When they did the 2008 dredging, they opened the river up all the way down to Lincoln Ave. So people, canoeists and kayakers come up and down, can get up as far as the ironworks. Then they've got to they have to port around a rapid that's right behind the 222 Central Street.
But you can't get up to Lake Quannapowitt anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, we people see the sign, and then we're like, no, you can actually. The trick with the river right now on the south side of the river is there are 3 bridges over it. And so if you go at high tide, you can't fit under the bridges. So you have to hit the tide right. But you can put in like Stocker Playground. There's a boat ramp there. You can put canoes and kayaks in. And if you time it right, you can ride the tide up to the ironworks. And then the tide will turn when you're up there, and then you can ride it back out.
So who owns Franker's Pond these days? Is it the town of Saugus?
I think it's the town of Saugus, but I'm not positive.
I believe it was taken over whenever they put the playground in there. It's part of it's under the auspices of the Saugus Playground Commission.
Okay.
Well, I hate to be the bad guy yet again, but maybe we should move into the kitchen. People could still ask a few questions. Let SCTV close up their section of the building, and maybe.
Thank you.